Trump's financial records, Trump maintained while he was in office, he was essentially above the law, immune from prosecution. The Supreme Court has said no. Ed, what's going on?
The Supremes are singing. Remember that singing group, the Supremes? I think the Supremes have done a very good job. I disagree with one of their decisions, but the rest I agree with. And the most fundamental thing they've done is said the president is not above the law. This is very important because, as you remember, American institutions were sliding under Trump. It looked like the Justice Department had gone under Trump. The Senate had fallen under Trump. The various committees of Congress had fallen under Trump. So now it took the Supreme Court to wrest justice back for America and give the nation some spine. This is a bigger defeat for Trump than he makes out, even though he's been very bitter about it. It's done three things. First, it says that he can be prosecuted even after he is president. That is a scary prospect for him, particularly in New York, where it's not only the Stormy Daniels matter he has to face, but a lot of other matters, including all the frauds he did while he was doing business there. The second thing it's done is place the Supreme Court above the fray. As you notice, the Supreme Court decisions are decisions that may be against Trump, and the timing may seem peculiar, but what they've done is delayed the implementation of any of this beyond the election. The third thing they've done is given justices spine. By the two justices recently appointed, that means all the justices he's appointed on federal courts will now feel, hey, I don't have to follow Trump. The Supreme Court is really the people on top of this game. So a lot of those justices will turn a corner against Trump on issues where the Supreme Court has spoken.
Just to unpack a few of those ones that you mentioned there. Look, this one's been compared to the likes of Nixon being forced to hand over tapes of conversations he'd recorded in the Oval Office, evidence in the Bill Clinton sexual harassment suit. But on its own, how significant is the case in not just reigning in Trump, but reigning in presidential power?
I think it's going to do that. Let's assume, not a safe assumption, that a new president is elected or that both houses are controlled by the Democrats. Neither one of them, for sure. What this decision does, it means the Congress can pass laws to limit what the president does, and they will do so. The next president will have to have his or her tax reforms in. They will have to abide by the rules concerning sending their people to testify before Senate and House committees and before the courts. So this is putting the strength back in democracy. And the Dreamer case is another one where they did the same thing. We're not going to allow a one man to strike out the freedoms of many people. So these were very strong, important decisions.
You touched on this before, but in the separate decision, the court ruled that Congress could not, at least for now, see many of the records that Trump has been blocking. And is this giving with one hand, taking with the other? They've said Congress needs to narrow their parameters a bit.
Yes, it is. But the giving is better than the taking. They've given a roadmap to the Congress as to exactly what they need to do and how they needed to get those records and what a court would have to find to get them. It also means it will not come back to the Supreme Court. If the Congress follows this roadmap, the first judge will demand that those tax returns be turned over. I suspect Mr. Trump will be an honorable citizen by then.
So when will the public get a look at these, if at all? Because it doesn't sound like it's going to have much of an impact prior to November.
It probably wouldn't, even if they were released. But you've seen what's happened. Grand juries are supposed to be secret, but we already know really what's in those tax returns. We already know what kind of deals he did with the various banks. Uh, as quiet as it kept, things will leak from the New York District Attorney's Office and from the New York State Prosecutor's Office and from the Justice Department. We will know well before the election. And Trump will be on the defensive for this entire electoral campaign. He's got COVID, he's got the courts, and now he has a real opponent.
Let's talk about some of the other cases that Trump has essentially lost in the court of late, because it has been a bit of a losing streak. One we spoke about already, but was a bit of a landmark win, was the Louisiana case on abortion rights. Anything to add on this, Ed?
Not much, except the court's going to stare a deceased. That means things that they decided before, they're not going to re-decide. And that's very, very important, because they went back a long way in both these cases, back to Clinton, etc., and to Nixon, to say, we're not going to decide these matters anymore. One of the theories of the Republican was, if we could stack the courts, we could change the laws that the Democrats brought in. It is clearly not going to be the case. Roberts will be around for a long time, and it looks like he's got 2 new teammates.
Another interesting one we haven't talked about, the Supreme Court has decided a large section of eastern Oklahoma remains a Native American reservation. What's going on here?
Well, this is something very different in the United States than Australia. Native American treaties specify the lands that they were supposed to be given full control over. That means they even have the control for criminal prosecutions on those lands. So if you go on the Navajo reservation and you're stopped by a cop, that cop will be a Navajo cop and arrest you under Navajo law, just like under Oklahoma law, Missouri law, or whatever. Unlike here, that land cannot be taken away from the people. They own it under the Constitution forever. And the court just nailed that home. This is such a large piece of territory, it will be vastly disturbing to both cattle ranchers, farmers, and to the oil industry. This is a big, big win. We may have one here soon, too.
And one I did want to talk about last week, or whenever it did come through, was the one about faithless electors. The Supreme Court refused to let fly faithless electors from state laws that currently and still force them to support the candidate who wins their state's popular votes. Ed, what was this one all about? And
this was about that tight election. You're probably just a young boy when this guy Gore ran against Bush. And in that case, there were a couple of people who were trying to get the electors to change their votes so that this matter would be clear. As a matter of fact, these were Democrats. They also tried the same thing in the Trump campaign when Trump was clearly not the winner of the full popular vote. They wanted the electors in some states to change, and it wouldn't have taken very many changes to make Clinton the victor. They went to court at that time, and the lower court struck that down because they're from state courts. So this has been appealed to the federal courts, and the federal courts say, we will sustain the actions of the lower courts, which means if you win in a state, you win all those electoral votes. This is going to be very important in those Rust Belt states, where if Biden wins by 2 or 3%, because they have so many electoral votes, he wins the election.
And one you did touch on before, but just to expand a little, the Supreme Court has ruled against Trump's move to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. I mean, DACA has been in Trump's sights since he took office. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is interesting. He could have ended that program by just going to Congress and getting a bill that included or excluded them to be passed by Congress. He knew any bill he passed would have to include a path to citizenship, which the far right bitterly refuses to do. So he chose the courts. Now, if he goes back, he has to correct all the impediments of trying to get rid of these immigrants, or they're not immigrants, they're born in the United States, I guess. What would you call them? American permanent guest out of the country. After Floyd, after a Hispanic was shot in Phoenix 2 days ago, an attack here would end his campaign.
So just circling back on all of these, the Supreme Court is one of the biggest issues going into the November election. We know the winner could very likely end up appointing the next Chief Justice, perhaps more than one. Does this losing streak have any other implications for the election?
It bolsters the people who are progressives, who are losing heart, thinking this man was making such a charge on democracy, they might as well seek citizenship somewhere else. But the combination of these court decisions and his failure with COVID means he's down and almost out. These are big, big wins, even though the implementation's postponed. That's not good for Trump either.
Well, Ed, I know those kids are ready and raring to go. I'll let you go. I'll let you go spend some time with the grandkids. But thanks very much, mate.
Yay, Supremes.
Fabulous, mate. I'll just stop it there. Look.